You're listening to Discovering Truth with Dan Duval. Friends, we're here on Discovering Truth with Dan Duval, and I am back with my buddy, Tony Rodrigues, whose last name I got right this time. Thank you.
Boom. You made it look easy, Dan.
I made it look easy. We messed it up twice. But on the third day, there's a resurrection. Look, man, I'm excited about what we're going to talk about today because I don't even know where we're going. But we are going to be picking up a conversation that is following two previous interviews on this podcast. Now, you have almost countless hours of interviews on the internet with different people and personalities and friends that are listening to this podcast. You're welcome to search for those and find them. But today we are going to be picking up on a point in Tony's story. And if you haven't seen his podcasts on this channel, just go back and find those where he describes how he was pulled into a 20 and back in the secret space program. And in those two videos, we basically talked through his time on Earth, his time on the moon, Mars, and then moving into his transportation to his role at the Ceres colony, which was Nazi camp on a dwarf planet. And in the context of this radical testimony, there is a point, and you talk about it in your book, which I have here for those of you that are watching this on YouTube, Ceres Colony Cavalier. Fun read. You talk about a point where you are taken not out of your physical body, but actually they transport your consciousness out of the clone body and send it somewhere else for 10 years.
For an additional 10 years, yes. What do they call the dolls? The Russian dolls, where they open it, there's another doll. It was like that, and they took me out of my life for 20 years, and I was, basically labor, and moved from program to program. And then in one of these programs, they had come across an ET species that had the technology to take somebody in my capacity that was in a 20-year career return program, or 20 and back, some people, and then take them again. And so what they're doing is they're stretching out and being able, because labor is the name of the game. It still is, in the world, labor is the bulk of most costs of everything that you do. So it's a very important commodity still. And robots can only do so much. Consciousness can drive so many things. It turns out that with cloning and with the advanced genetic technology that exists in the cosmos, that consciousness is actually a very valuable currency. And during that time, I was taken again, and I'm not talking about this in interviews. So as I do more interviews, like you said, I've done hundreds of interviews and 1,000 hours plus. When you talk about the same things, I have the verbiage right there that I can talk about really quick. So I've never talked about this extra 10 years. I wanted it in the book. When we were writing the book, there was a time when I thought, there's no need to, it's a can of worms. But really what happened was something very spiritual happened to me at the end of that time. There was a very spiritual event. And for the sake of the book, the second book that I'm writing, that I'm working on, is coming along very good, that is due to be released in April of 23, so not too long from now. The cover art's coming along and the book's coming along. For the sake of that, I'm not going to tell the reveal, because there is kind of a reveal at the end of it. And I think that as I've been writing it, so those 10 years, I put those in there, and my editor, Jackie, said, look, you should make this your second book as a companion to your book. People are going to want more. And lo and behold, that was the case. But a lot of people I get contacted a lot, like, I loved your book, Tony, thank you, and please write another, please give more. And so as I'm writing the second book, what I'm finding out is because of that spiritual event that is a vague memory, not a clear memory like the first book, um, that the first book maybe end up being the companion to the second one. That the invent in terms of importance of what happened when I look back on it, like I'm definitely not going to have the page count. We'll fill it out with some things, but it's going to be probably right in the ballpark, a little bit under what series Calvin and Cavalier was, but the things that I witnessed and just the way that it ended up when I ended before I got back to series at the end of that 10 years were very profound. And they were things that I always kind of carried with me that I always suspected played a role in um, the entire experience, the whole 20 years. Like I always thought that what happened to me was kind of like I had a a guardian angel over me. And I think I still do. I think I still do because, the right people and the right things still continue to have, knock on wood, still keep happening to me. And, for somebody that's talking about the things that I've done publicly, some very dark things that are very relevant that, you know, somebody to say the things that I have and present the amount of evidence that I have is a dangerous thing. It has been a dangerous thing in the past. And so I got to feel that I've been blessed in many ways. And one of them is for me to be able to tell my story and maintain a bit of safety about it. So anyhow, the second book, I'll give you a tidbit if that's what you're. I can see the wheels turning. That's what it is. I can see you the same time you can see me, and I can see the wheels turning in there.
I'm excited about the whole thing, and one of the things that I was just like crossing my mind as you're talking. I have listeners that heard you on my program, friend, and said, "I'm gonna pray for Tony."
Hmm.
You have people praying for you.
That's right. That's very right. And it's a blessing. It's an absolute blessing. People come, the last few conferences, I've had people come up to Tony, I've watched you and I just love you. And I just want, they're very, and we don't see it. When somebody's rude to you in life, you see on TV how to respond rudely back, how to handle it. You see it, and you see in the media, when somebody's rude to you, you have a response that you learned on television somewhere. But we don't ever see on television people being honored. So we don't know. I don't have the response for it. Really, what I do in person is because I don't have the words when somebody I'm so grateful for a stranger to come up to me and say, Tony, I followed your work, I read your book, and I just love you. And they say nice things to me. They say wonderful things. I don't know how to respond to that. So I just transition to a hug. Come here, give me a hug. Because that's what I can speak energetically, just I hug them, but it's really hard. It's really hard to have the words for that. But this is an absolute blessing. I've been very lucky to have lived and witnessed that part in my life to have people being very supportive after what I went through. But I'm older and got over a lot of it for the most part. But to have that, it's like anyhow. So I don't know what to say exactly, but I do feel very blessed for the outpouring of love that people have showed me online and in person. So, but
Wow.
the second book, when they took us, what happened was
Yeah.
the Series Colony Corporation, their mission was technology. Period. It was to acquire technology. They were aware that they were not the most advanced, and they're in a technology race with other colonies inside our solar system that are under the same umbrella of corporations. So that's their entire. It's not to seek out new life and new civilization. That's not their mandate. So to that end, they came across a species from another galaxy, from an extragalactic species that had the technology to take. They had the need, and they were trading a technology, and I don't even know what it was. I really don't. I don't know if it was knowledge or like math algorithm. I really don't know what they traded for it, but it was very lucrative to them, to the officers. After the event happened, the officers said, "Look, we did it. We got it. We got paid very well from what happened." And I said, "You can't do this. This is illegal. You can't tech. We're gonna." And they said, "No, they have the tech. They've got it solved. They've got it figured out. You're going to be fine." And what they did was they took their slave labor. They took their workforce of slaves and plugged them in and gave them another, bout of slave labor for them. And it was only in the blink of an eye. I was gone for 10 years, but I was back, in an hour or a half hour or less than that, probably. Just, they took me in and put me into a machine, and there was a process, and then I was gone. But the thing they did was they put me in a non-human body. They put me in a much simpler vessel than a human. They put me in something that was, and I had the maturity of about a 13-year-old. Like, I had the mental capacity of a very young person, emotionally and everything. Like, it was a watered down version, so that they needed less of it. And what I'm starting to think of it now, as I write the second book, I'm starting to think of it now that our consciousness, when people ask me about the technique, because it's very confusing to explain to somebody that has no idea. And I say it's like a beam of light. Like, your consciousness is like a beam of light that's split off from a light. It's like a beam. And what they did was they took half of the beam and diverted it to another vessel. And so I was half as bright each time. And then when the 20 years was over, that other vessel died, and I got my brightness back. And that's really what it felt like too. So in my life, like, at the moment that I was taken, ever after those next 20 years in my organic life here in Michigan, where I was living, my life was very turbulent. I didn't have the state of frame of mind that I did when it was all over. There was a day 20 years later when it was all over, and I woke up and went, wow, it's all over. And it was the same thing. Like, and I described it as water before, like a bucket of water. They took half the water, but I think it's more accurate to call it a beam of light.
Mhm.
And so there's a light coming from somewhere that is our consciousness. And so they took half of that light and drove something else. And then they took a little bit of that and drove something else that was not required, that didn't require the conscious. That's what I mean. So when they originally took me and my consciousness was split, both vessels were just as talented as each other. They were both, I was the exact same person. I was just as talented. I could learn things and do, I was that. But that when they took me for the 10 years, the vessel they put me in was non-sexual, was non ambitious, was not educated, and just did a certain job for a project, for a very large project that I'm starting to find out from other whistleblowers is a universal technology, something that they
Mm.
do where the project is something. So the ones that they ran it a little bit maybe unscrupulously, the one that I was involved in and how they acquired it. But when it was over, I appeared right back on Sirius Colony and walked out very confused and had very little memory of it. But I began to be visited from things that they believe I'd met out there, and that's what I'm saying. That's kind of the reveal. It's kind of a reveal at the end, and it ties back to, I think, towards the end, a very spiritual thing, a very spiritual, a very meaningful contact that I had.
So
There was an incident that I had. So, okay, go ahead. I'm not on a rant. I give it to me.
no, you're doing you saying it. Okay, so tracking with the story. I have some things to say, right? And also I'll probably insert a few things here, but this is what I hear. I hear that you were on Ceres Colony already, so that you had gone through the moon, you've been with Mars and Mars Corp and the military over there doing what they had you doing, and then you got sent to Ceres, and on Ceres, then you got pulled into this. They put you in a room, pulled out your consciousness, and then they put it in another body. Now, this is what I'm going to ask. Where was that body?
It was in another galaxy. Wow, what a big word and what a huge statement to say. But that body, it was as if they took it, and I don't know if they traveled, if there was a period of time, like if they put it somehow in a vessel, or if there was an instant. How they did it, I don't know if there was a period of time that passed. But I woke up in another body, and I know vaguely where it was. So the Whirlpool Galaxy is basically, there is a Messier object that has two galaxies, and it was the one behind it. So it was known to us, and it's visible from Earth. But it was a region, a galaxy that had been not, like, like not formed all the way. Like when a galaxy is large enough, a healthy galaxy, let's call it healthy, which for lack of a better term, I don't know. But your standard galaxy in its lifespan will make barred arms and make the spiral arms.
Yes.
So, and then it will eventually, it turns into a disk. Um, this was a cloud of a galaxy that had irregular star formation. It had the resources. It was not a fully formed galaxy, so the resources were not as predictable as they are in other more healthy galaxies. I don't even like that term. I really don't like that. I think that's a complete misnomer. Other galaxies that are formed, like the standard galaxy model, is a spiraled or a barred galaxy. Like that's the standard that what we observe in the observable universe. This was a galaxy that's, gosh, I forget the term. There is a term for it in astronomy I've seen, but it was
Okay.
basically a ball. Basically, all the stars spread out into a ball, and all the resources were spread out like that. So they had problems like that once. So imagine. Let's put it in terms of a society here on Earth, like a society, a race of people or a group of people that lived on a continent that had great resources, advanced in technology. Like you look at the Europeans, they were able to get steel and they started cutting the trees down and they went into the Iron Age. But other uh, groups of people in the world did not have the resources. So because the Indians in the Americas didn't have the food resources or the farming, they had to move around and for their food. So they were nomadic and they didn't really stay long enough to advance and learn steel. And then you look at cultures on the islands like Polynesia or the Hawaiians. They had really technology was very hard for them to come by. There was less of them and less resources. So the same people, the same intelligence, the same everything, all things being the same, the ones that were in an area with great resources advanced in technology. And that's our own history. And I believe that this went on in the cosmos and that galaxy, because the resources were different, they were fighting to keep up with technology. They were fighting, they had to innovate in ways that species in a regular shape, in a standard galaxy model, once they get to that level, once you get to that level of space travel, interstellar trade, and there's a level of technology there that we're not there yet. I don't even think the secret space program is there yet. I'm talking about a level where everybody on the planet is interacting with everybody else on other planets. And so once they got to that level, they were deficient in many ways, and they were trying to be innovative and figure out ways to do it. And so that's why they came. And when the Ceres Colony Corporation, however, made contact with them and said, "Hey, what do you guys got?" There was a resource that they needed, and that resource was consciousness that was cleared to be traded for. And it wasn't a horrible existence. It was actually less horrible than what I was already living on Ceres Colony. So I had, you know, a measure of, a lifestyle that was slightly better than what I was living as a slave on Ceres Colony Corp in those years. And this would have been, so I look back on it, this would have been probably like in the early 90s in our timeline, in the time that this is about when it took place, 1794-ish, 92 to 96.
So we're going to go deeper in this. Now, I just have to say a few things. Now, number one, this is not the first time I'm hearing something like this.
Really?
No.
Really?
Well, of course not. And even on this podcast, I had a guest a couple of years ago, and he had autism. And his testimony was that he was delivered of autism. And this gentleman is actually from Australia. And while he was in his autism, he would sometimes, for lack of better words, trance out. And when he would do that, he would be in his other body that would be in space. And that other body was reptilian in nature. And he'd be in that body doing, and he kind of thought, well, maybe I'm just having a fantastic imagination, but it was very, very real. And he'd be tranced out, just totally dissociated here. And then he'd come back here and he'd be in his normal human body. And he described that on this podcast. And I know that this is something that happens where there's a trade, and you're calling it consciousness, and I would also call it soul, is being sent around, and that can go very far. And so you have your consciousness being sent to another galaxy because there's a trade, you're the goods, and being put in another body. I think it's so interesting that you said that existence was actually not as bad as what they were putting you on in the series. So how awful. Wow, that's a big statement. Tell me more about this body, this non-sexual body that it parked you at a 13-year-old mental development or whatever. Explain that.
So I'm saying that to describe the experience. Like, it was it was as if, yeah, I mean, you know how it is. If we're adults and people listening to this, and no offense, kids, really, no offense to any young people that are listening to this, but there's a stage of development where as you get older, you're mentally things are going to clarify, things are going to clear. And looking back on my life, that's what that existence was like. It was as if I was a teen, an early teen, mentally. And I had that kind of thought process. There's a thought process that like a young boy has that's different than a grown man or a man in his 20s. Like, there's a thought process when they solve, because they see things in a different way. And it was just like that. I was a dark charcoalish, maybe, color, and there were other beings the same. There were taller ones that were kind of in command, and then we were working on our I don't want to say too much, you know what I mean? Because the other thing is there's been a bit of plagiarism in the community lately, and so I'm keeping a lot of the I'm keeping a lot of the things that may be supporting evidence close to my chest, because somebody will get wind of it and it's immediately in their book and it's published and boom. And, so it happened. I'm looking back at things I said on YouTube 5 years ago. And when I look back at when other people said it, there was a fair amount of plagiarism. So there's a lot of it that goes on. So that's the only reason I'm not sharing a lot of the details. And
That's
I'm
just
more
so
than happy.
unfortunate. Wow.
Yeah. And I'm more than happy to come back when the book comes out and tell you and dump the whole goods. So
Okay.
I definitely would love to do that, because I really like you guys, and I I really love being on your show. So, um, but that being said, it was a simpler existence, and it was I don't know, I think it was three fingers and a thumb, maybe two and a thumb, three and a thumb. And like I said, the other reason that I've never really covered this material in a lot of other interviews, in fact, every interview I've ever done, I've never really touched on this, just because the memories are more vague. So for me to talk about this time against somebody that's very skeptical and get a high speed back and forth, I really don't have a clear picture like I do the time on series or on the 20 years that I did. I have a very clear picture, very good memories of that. So I can kind of defend myself when somebody's skeptical and they come with cross-referencing questions. But this 10 years, it's very vague. It's very hard to write for that reason. It's easier to write because I didn't get the abuse. When I was writing Series Colony Cavalier, I was reliving the abuse as I wrote about it. It was very painful, very difficult to write. This 10 years wasn't that abusive in those ways. There was abuse, but it was a different kind, like as a worker for I guess mismanaged I was a worker under mismanagement. Basically, that was the form of abuse. So there was a bit of mismanagement over the resources, but it really wasn't that bad of an experience. So looking back on it. But
So
it was very lonely. It was a lonely existence. We were separated from, and we were kept away from the general population of the rest of the beings that we were part of for that reason, because we were guest labor, and so they kept us separated from everybody. And there was an amount of loneliness about it. So they pacified us. We had video games. That was we had video games. So that's, do you think about that? If you so think about taking a consciousness and making a labor force from consciousness that you're giving information to another species, and then you put them in a genetically built body that's stuck at 13 years old, and you put them in their room and you just give them video games, and then they come out of the room and do their work, do their job, what you've built them to do very well, I might add. And so when you think about like that, when you think about a system like that, it's actually very effective, very cost effective, and um, whatever, very productive. It was very productive. So that was kind of what the existence was like. And a lot of us, what happened was a lot of kids, and I say this in the book, and my editor struck the line from the book, and this is a point, and I think we talked about this in one of our previous shows, was at the very end of that. If you read in the book, I forget what it's like, 117 page. I got a book around here somewhere. It's like 117 or 119. I
I
think
can
it's in that
fact
area.
check you. I'll
Please
look up
do.
117.
Yeah. But at the end of that, I wanted to say, it says kind of like, but that's another story. I think it's right in there.
It on 117 of your book, you were talking about Peggy and Jeremy.
Nope, so that's not it. So it's farther on. It's way
Okay.
farther than that. That's still in Seattle.
Yep.
Huh.
It's okay.
I'm not in reach of it. Anyhow, I want to say this, that at the end of that, it said, but that is another story. And it left it open for the second book. I did that on purpose. But the line that
I remember that part. Yeah,
I wanted
because
to
I
name,
was like, if I can interview this guy, I'm going to
I can
ask the
get this.
question.
I'm going to get this. Well, you're the first one, I think. I don't think I've told anybody else about it. I've said it in a few like live Q&As. I've talked about it briefly, but not at this thing. But I wanted to name the entire chapter, "What Does the Devil Steal?" And she wouldn't let me. My editor fought me. She held her ground on it, and I let her, and I capitulated. But I wanted to name the chapter because what does the devil steal? He steals your soul.
I was hoping we
Well,
agree.
we're
Wow.
talking about the technology to take your soul. Do you understand what I put that together? I said, look, this, when you look back at lore, when you look back at the religious lore in history, there's a lot about the devil, in the Old Testament that just doesn't make sense. And hell, going to hell, you're going to go to hell, right? You're going to go and for I think eternity is a long time. But when you look at it, and then now we're talking about, now I'm bringing to light this technology where they're taking, you can call it whatever you want, like chi, soul, consciousness, awareness. It's all the same. It's all the spark of life, whatever you want to call it. We can call it Fred. We all have Fred. Um, but if you look back in lore and you see what it says, not only in the Bible, but in all the texts, that
Well,
there's a being that comes and takes your soul.
and
And
in the in this is one of the things that because I did a whole I've done so much on this subject, right? Because that's what I do, right? We are in the business of getting people's souls redeemed and put back together in the name of Jesus. Like that's what I do. And so, but what we've found in the course of ministry and trying to help people is that we're pulling people's soul parts back from all over the cosmos, which makes me uniquely interested in your information because you're explaining the experience of what soul is going through in these places that people cannot connect to because it's blocked. I mean, it's just locked down, but we're still dealing with, and I take it back to this, in the book of Revelation, and it's talking about Babylon, like as a spiritual kingdom and government and all this stuff. It says it trades in the bodies and souls of men. Babylon. That's like,
Wow.
and look, there, I call it the cosmic soul trade. And I was calling it the cosmic soul trade before I met you. And I was like, this guy, he has the keys. Like, this is what I've been looking at for years. And you come on, like, yeah, I was on Series Colony and they put me up there, pulled me out of my bio.
And put me right back.
And you know what? I've sat down with several other people, Germans, some of them. And when we've brought up Series Colony, secret space program, like, they are there now. Like, that is so accurate. Like, and that's one of the reasons why I think people are triggering and being attracted to your information, because they're resonating on something that affects their lives too. Because these projects go far and wide. They are vast.
Yes, I did preliminary math and just on the logistics. One time I sat and kind of real quick on a piece of paper, and I'm going to butcher the numbers because it was something I didn't care about. I just wanted to see, like, realistically, how many people could they take, right? Like, realistically, logistically, how many, because it's not all of us. There's a genetic factor involved, so not everybody can go. For one, for the technology, there's actually a genetic threshold. So not everybody has the genetic, which is why we're seeing it generational. We're seeing this happen to parents and their kids and their grandkids, because the genetics to go, once you go into the program, they know that your kids have a high probability of having the correct genetics. They don't got to go look for it. So, but I did a quick thing, and I based it on what I saw. Four guys, 4-man crew, a doctor, and then a 2-man or 3-man crew of security that only worked for a few minutes. So one of them could go every 15 minutes. And the 4-man crew worked with me, and I gave them 4 hours on total on what I remember of the process in and out. And so once you're in, they cut you loose, and the other programs take you. So you go you go to school and then go on to work. And then when you come back out, there's another 2-hour process, or there's another process, and then they put you back. So I looked at that realistically, the manpower, and these are ETs, so calling them men is a misnomer. But the manpower it would take, and how, if they really were cranking, and you take a base on the backside of the moon, the size of the Pentagon, just one, or a good mall, like a shopping mall size, and you pack it with these offices. I was in basically like a doctor's office, and I went to 2 or 3 other places in the building, during the process, the intake process. And quickly I got into the 500,000 a month. And so that's whatever, 6 million a year over 100 years is, 6 billion, was 600 million people, or six, whatever. Like I said, I'll butcher the numbers talking about it. But quickly, when you do a 4-man crew, 2 a day, and then you fill one building the size of the Pentagon, or a hospital size building, which is not very big, and then put many stories. So put a few, 500, 1,000 of them, you can get into really high numbers really fast. And so the reality of this is that it's probably very widespread, and it's happening to a great deal of people. Like you said, you're dealing with people that it resonates to. People read my book is still selling. It's coming up on a year, and it's selling very well. And so it's not because I'm paying for commercials, because I'm not. And the thing is, people read it, and I get feedback, and people read it and go, "Man, I read your book, and I couldn't believe it, because I knew it all along." And I had to tell my dad about it, and I bought him a copy. And I had to tell my sister about it. I bought her a copy, and then she read it, and her husband started crying when he read it. And so people are reading it and getting their head around something that they kind of already knew, that they may have experienced, or they may have witnessed experience. And then it opens their mind, and they go, that was the same thing that I went through in the beginning when I heard it from Randy Kramer's info. I went, oh my God, that's what happened to me. And when I got something that really justified the memories, I got an okay to remember. And so people are getting this information. And so that's what I mean. The reason the main tool to get away with it, the main tool is not space flight or laser beams or teleporters. The main technology that they're doing this with is secrecy.
Wow.
That's the tech. That's the magic sauce. And so that's where I'm at right now, with telling the story. While I really believe in telling the story and letting people know, even though I take my lumps, like, what it's like. I take my lumps from people that are very, very skeptical, people that have had the people without the genetics, maybe, but people that have had no experience. So it just doesn't make sense if it's not in your reality. You had no experience, never saw a UFO, you never had anything. So you read the book, it's just like, man, that's crazy. There's no way. So those people, I tend to get attacked and I get lumps, but I've also had some official pushback. So that means that I'm doing something right. So
Mm.
if a letter agency, or if I get somebody that's very good at pushing back, then I know I'm doing something right, and I take it as flattery, even though and I'm not gonna waste half your show talking about how that goes. Talking about negative, I don't want to bellyache on your show. There's so many better things we can do, but I'm saying that when that does happen, I take it as flattery.
Brilliant. So let's come back to this point that you made. It's just I'm still hanging on this point. You were playing video games in a non-human body in another galaxy between work shifts.
Wow.
I mean, that is a bomb drop if I've ever heard one. This is amazing. So tell us a little bit more about the environment. So it was isolated. Does that mean that, like, for these rooms, for instance, were you by yourself or did you have a roommate?
Yes. No, I had my own room. We did not have water. So the shower was a sonic, there was a beam. So I had to shower. And when you went in the shower, it was like an ultrasonic. And it was like a sand, the soap was a sandy thing, and you scrub it. And that's while this body had very little water that it had. And there was actually, the food wasn't great, but the room I was in had a screen, and it had like there was an interface that would plug into me directly, and that's how I'd interface with the computer system. And the screen, there was an AI that told me what to do. There was an AI that said, stop. There were times when I threw tantrums and I started kicking things, and it came on. The AI would come on and say, stop what you're doing, and I would say, no, I want to talk to somebody, and I threw a tantrum, and it would say stop or you'll be disciplined, blah blah blah. And then there was a light that came on that was irritating. It was a punishment. The light would come on. It was like a bright ultraviolet light, and it would hurt lightly. Not a stinging pain, but like a dull, irritating pain on your skin wherever the light touched you. And I tried to be clever and kind of shy, but you couldn't get away from it. And so you would end up capitulating and say, now lay down on the bed, and it would tell you what to do until you went to sleep. And so there was an AI there. So on days after that, I'd lose my privileges. When I there was a menu, there was news and like what's the word, instructional videos that you could watch. There was a menu on the screen is my computer that I had. It was a small, like a 1 bedroom little studio, just a bed and a very small place, almost like the Fifth Element. So it was a lot like the Bruce Willis's apartment in the Fifth Element. Not that it did look much different than that. It looked much different than that, but about that size. But there was an AI that basically took care of us, that told us, okay, it's time to get up, get dressed, hurry up and get dressed, or you'll get the light. You know what I mean? Like you did what you were told. So, but when you were good, so when you hit the numbers, and when we were good, it would reward you. And then the entertainment menu would have things that popped up and then you could you could go to those, and they were games. And so you got rewarded for good behavior and you got punished for bad behavior. You would get time out. So, and there were certain games that were just like what we have today that were multiplayer, but they were more immersive. They were multiplayer, and they set it up to where people could only, and I'll call them people because they were all ETs of this, and they were not always on. So it was a base that was basically essentially in a large asteroid, is where I was living,
So it
and
wasn't
a planet.
planet.
No,
Okay.
and so it was in a nebula in that
Wow.
place. But there were people in these games on certain game when you got really high access and you did good for a long time. You were playing games with people that were on planets or other bases very far away. It was the network, And they made it to where you could only communicate 3 or 4 words at a time in order for security. So you could only say, you could only say, hi, how's it going? I'm good. And so you would communicate and you get to know people through actions, and you'd get friends that you'd come back the next night, they'd be there, and you would develop, you know what I mean, online, like video game relationships. But over time, we were able to get a lot of information back and forth to each other. So where are you from? Oops, gotta go. And then I'm from here the next day. Like they deeply regulated communication, but over time, if you were good for a long time, and there was a version of popularity, I guess, we got to figure out what we were doing. And with that, I saw that that not only from that, but from the command, we were getting briefings too for our missions, what we were doing, the days that, and you would see kind of, if you've ever worked for a company that was unraveling, they don't tell the workers that the company is unraveling. They try, okay, everything's just fine. We're going to have your paychecks. They're all there, even though there's no money in the bank account. They still want you to keep working till Friday. You understand, like um, that kind of thing. Those kind of things were starting to be obvious to us as we were working. That it was unraveling at the top, and whatever. It's funny because
Wow.
I said all this, so it's not. It's sadly I wasn't on the record. So Jackie Kenner, my editor, is the only other person, and I've spoken some of it with Elena Denon, if you know who that is. Know the gist of the story beyond what I'm telling you, like the actual how it's going to end. And I spoke with Jackie maybe 2 years ago about it, but we're starting to see things come out. Like we're starting to see stories in Hollywood come out. The Andor story. We're starting to see kind of the same story that's coming out of what I'm about to write. That is, but I went on the record. I have a witness in Jackie, but I didn't really. I should have written it much sooner. Um, but I didn't. Like I had my hands full with my book. I just finished. It hasn't even been a year since Series Colony's been out, so I always was doing interviews, and I trusted that doing things like this were going to do the job. This was going to be my historical account. I've done all these videos, and what I found is that they disappear. It's very easily for videos to come online and to be deleted. And I went, oh no. And that's kind of when I wrote, got motivated to do the book. And because of the fanfare of the first book, now I'm really motivated for the second one because people have been so good to me about the first book.
So yeah, well, these things happen, don't they? I'll tell you what. People do borrow. I want to ask this next question. All right. So, what was the project 10 years? Is that one of the things that you can't disclose to us yet?
I just can't give it to you yet, man. I'm so sorry.
Can't give it to me. Okay. All right. So do you have any idea regarding the architect of the network? How do you think they create an interplanetary network of communication that they were plugging into? Yeah.
So I can't tell you I will say this, that the experience, again, so this is the first time I've ever spoken to this in interview. So I don't have the verbiage just on cue.
Yes.
So I've got to set this right. So I've got to be right about this, but I got to work this out. You guys are seeing me, do this. This is actually more how I really talk. After I do interviews and after the book comes out, I'll do 20 interviews and I'll have all this really quick. I'll be fast with it. But the things I remember from that time, it's like obviously there's a great deal I don't remember. The things I do remember are losing the faith in what was essentially my parents of that in that existence. The people that were the people that were in charge of me, there were people that had the role of authority. They were my parents. And in this case, it was a government, like a form of government or a form of. It wasn't really militarized. We were doing construction. We were building big things, um, and beginning to lose my faith in them was what I remember. Was the terrifying thing. Was the that's what I remember the most, is that there was a point when I went, oh, they don't really care about me. They don't care what, and they're in kind of in deep shit. Pardon my language, but they're kind of in. I could tell that they had big problems. Like there was a time, like I clipped on for 5 or 6, 7 years, 7 years into the project, and everything was fine. And I got good at what I was doing, and I got good. I didn't get disciplined. I got it together and was doing good, right? So I was in a place where I was being very productive, and they expected me to do something, and it became easy for me to do what they expected. And then it kind of unraveled on their end, and I started to witness it. And because I had been good, because I had been somebody that was performing, that was good, I was inside. I was inside. I was sitting, you know what I mean? Like I was in a position to where I could see things unravel. And I went, whoa, not only do they not care about me, but they're in deep trouble, and who's in charge of them doesn't care about them either. I saw that happen. And that's what I remember the clearest.
Mm.
That's what I remember the most of this time of what was going on there. So that's the memories that the every day-to-day stuff I don't remember. But that being said, um, I can compare those memories to what we live in now, and they were telling us a bunch of lies. They were telling us that they were one. They were like I don't have the word. The word empire isn't right. They were one organization that had either made allied with, treated, or occupied most of the galaxy that they were in. That there was basically one big organization, and they had peace. That it wasn't. They were not. They were telling us that everything was fine. That that they were taken care of, and that galaxy was at peace. The lie they told us was that they couldn't go to the next galaxy, which was fairly nearby in terms of distance, and they were trying to manufacture like that people in the next galaxy are a threat, and we need to get all these things built, because if they get here, we already have some of them get here, and they're very mean towards us. They're very hawkish towards us, and they're a threat. We're in danger from the beings that live in the galaxy next door, which was in close proximity. This was something they were systematically lying to us about. And now that I look back on it, after I look back on it, like in my life, when I got my memory recall after 2015, and I looked back at that, I really thought that is similar to the lies that we get. Don't The Russians are bad; they're going to get you. Remember all the whole Cold War.
Oh
The
yeah.
Russians are bad. During the Cold War. During the Cold War, the Russians were not being told that America was going to get them. The Russians were being told that the Germans were going to get them. I've talked to a friend that grew up in Russia, and I said, "What was it like during the Cold War?" I asked him, "Well, what was it like? Were you scared of America?" He said, "We loved America. We loved your movies. We all wanted to come to America." I said, "You didn't hate us? You didn't tell you we were going to nuke you?" He said, "No." He's like, "No." He's like, "We were ready to fight Germany. They said Germany was going to attack us." That's the Cold War. During the Cold War, the Russians thought Germans were going to attack them. They were ready to fight. They were being programmed to war against Germany, and we were being programmed to war against them. That's the fear lying that goes on for probably many different reasons. And it could be a thread of truth in there. Who knows? But in this situation, when I was out there, they were lying to us because I was purchased from another galaxy. So I knew that galactic travel was possible, but they were telling us that it was impossible to leave the galaxy. That's what I'm saying. Like in the nets and the computer, like the official thing dogma that we were being taught was that we couldn't leave that galaxy, but the other galaxy had beings that could get to us, and we were in fact in danger. And so that was their control mechanism, like that was their version of that lie. And that's something that I remember. That's like a mechanism of that society that I remember, that was, that far away, that they were still using propaganda to control people. in that way, and a fear-based propaganda.
Amazing. Amazing. They're using fear-based propaganda to control a community of people's consciousness habitating alternate bodies. Wow.
Well, yeah, I don't think we were the standard. That's the thing. I think the project that I was in, I think we were building a macro, um, we were on a project to build something very, very big.
Mhm.
And I think that it began something that took many years to do. And we're talking about 100 years, maybe
Mhm.
200 years of a project. And I think that it got behind.
Mm.
And like, that was another thing that they didn't tell. We told us that we were behind, that we were doing bad. When it come to find out that the management were actually decades behind where they were
Whoa.
supposed to be. And so we found that was one of the things that I discovered over time, but talking to other people elsewhere that were talking about the project in these, during the communication. And so that's why I think why they were desperate and bought the consciousness. They sought out additional labor. It was maybe quicker to clone up a body. Maybe this technology was quicker for them. I don't know really a lot of the logistics about it, but I think that they were desperate, and that's why they resorted to having me there, to how I ended up there. I don't think it was the norm. I don't think that my existence there was the norm, and I think that that's why we were so isolated from everybody else. We were an
Wow.
extending, we were imagine a giant nebula that is getting built, turned into something. And so you can have areas of it. I mean, we're talking about light years in distance. So you can have actually, there's millions and millions of personnel that are working that's a big enough area they can have no contact with each other ever.
Sure.
Millions of people. And so they were falling behind and they needed more hands. And so they just used this tech.
Now, I'm going to ask another question, right? So you were essentially a slave that was sold because you were a
Yes.
slave to Ceres Colony and you were sold to this project. So usually if there's a trade, not only did this group get you, but Ceres Colony got something.
Mm-hmm.
What were they getting?
So they were getting, it was knowledge, it was a technology, but they were getting it in the form of like a book. Like they were getting a volume of, and I'm saying it wasn't books, it wasn't a physical book, but imagine they were getting 100 volumes of books of technical data or scientific information from a species that was advanced in that kind of information. They're from a different star forming region, so they have privy to other. They had to innovate in different ways. So they had knowledge that was different, and so they said that they were getting that they had their eye. So when I was being walked and briefed, especially after it was over, but when I was getting walked in and briefed, they said, "This is a sweet deal for us." The guys that were walking me to the hallway said, "This is a sweet deal for us, because even if we get even half of it, we're going to be way ahead of everybody. This is going to put us way ahead of where we were. These guys have a lot of info, and they don't really value it for what it is." Like, in other words, they were saying that it was cheap compared to get this kind of technology and trade us to go do 10 years and back, or however many guys it was, 100 guys or a few 100,000 guys, who knows, that it was cheap for the amount of tech. And they said, there's only a few things that they know that we want, but we're not going to tell them that because they'll charge us more. So we're getting this whole body of work, and we hope that we get that far. To where we get it, we just don't know. And it was in the very beginning of the project of it all happening. When I came back, they canceled it, and they said, "No, we didn't. The deal's over with. We're not going to do it. We're not going to do it." I said, "Are you guys going to keep doing this for the whole 10,000 guys or whatever it is?" They said, "No, it didn't work out. We're not really great for the technology, but we got what we wanted." And they were very happy. It was a complete success as far as Ceres Colony Corporation was concerned. That I imagine out of a volume of 100 books, they only wanted really two of the books, And so they didn't know where they were going to come. And during the payment, like every month they got paid a book, and then they gave this many souls or this many heads, and then they got their book, and that was how the deal was set up, structured. And they got far enough to where they got the 2 books they wanted, and then they tried to keep going, and then it canceled. They canceled it. I'll explain all that. Like I said, I'm treading lightly with you, and it's not that I don't want to share with you,
No,
brother.
I get it. You got a book coming out in April. So
Mm.
you're dropping breadcrumbs.
Yes.
Eventually, you're going to sell some books. And I mean, I get it. It's a great strategy. Plus,
Well,
you're trying to, avoid plagiarism.
plagiarism. That's well,
Mm-hmm.
I'm afraid of that. Some of that happened in the beginning with interviews, and like I said, rather than sit and bellyache about negative things, and not only that, but it's happened to other people. So some of my friends that have books too that wrote. There's a very there in my genre, in the secret space program whistleblower or witness genre, if that's what you want to call it, whatever. Not only are we telling things that are very hard to believe based on ufology, we're telling things that are very important that people don't realize. People just look at it as ufology and it's fringe and it's woo or whatever. It's just like
No.
learning how to meditate or whatever. No, we're actually giving away somebody's national secrets, right? So it's very dangerous. And there's an entirely highly advanced industry around stealing them from us to make us look less credible. And what I've learned over time, that's what I've learned over time is that others have had their books outright stolen from them, and then all of and you see, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm biting my tongue here, but you realize that the people that are doing the stealing have access to incredible technology that we don't think about on a day-to-day basis. Like you might think that somebody stealing something has a hidden camera or can hack your email. I'm talking about people that can travel time.
Well,
I'm
I
talking about
just
projects
got
that
done doing 2 parts with the 5th generation super soldier who worked with the Time Bureau.
right, right. So you get what I'm saying, though. I'm saying, and I understand you know what I'm talking about, Dan. But I mean, to the listener or the person that's watching this, I just want to say that it is a problem. It is something and I don't have many more books like this in me. So you know what I mean. Like I'm getting the whole story out, and this one has like I said, a fairly, I think, a fairly profound spiritual reveal at the end of it. And I think the reason that I'm talking it up for one. And I don't really, selling books is one thing. Like I could write a pamphlet at this point because I'm hot on the trail of Series Colony Cavalier. I could write a piece of garbage and it'll sell for the first 90 days. Like it'll sell until the reviews tear it apart. So right. So anything I put out, if I'm not really thinking about the dollars and cents of it. Really, I'm not. I won't do that. Like the next book is just as, like I said, it's just as profound to me as Series Colony Cavalier, and I believe in the mission that this, like I said, this is something that I'm hoping, and I don't know, people, it might not be received. People might go, it's hard to believe that, Tony. But I'm thinking that if I do this right, and I haven't wrote the end of it yet, but if I get the end of it written right, it's going to make people see themselves in a different light because we have certainly been lied to about what we really are, about our real true power of what we really are. And I just want the people to know that after what I'm going to start crying. I want people to know that after what I went through and what I discovered at that point was that each and every one of us is far more significant than what we've lived and led to believe. Very much so, like in a very big way, like on off the chart. There is not a chart. There is not an acronym or a metaphor that I could give you that would do it justice. Like you are far more important than what you think you are. And that's why there's an entire apparatus. That's why the entirety of all of our civilization is geared around taking that from you
Mm.
because you're that powerful. So that is the gist. And that's what I'm saying. Now you see that Series Colony Cavalier is, I thought it was the main book and this was going to be the companion. When I think that when I'm looking at it, because now I'm stepping back, before it was just in my mind. right? Like you remember when you were young and you went to school, took that class in college, you didn't understand how important it was. And now that you're grown up, you go, oh, wow, that was pretty important. I'm glad that turns out that was very important that I did that. And so that's kind of what I'm going through writing the second book, is I'm realizing that was probably the whole reason for the whole thing, for the whole why I remember and why I've been outwardly blessed with the experience of, you know what I mean? Like ultimately what was a bad experience has turned into something that has meaning.
You know, there's a lot that I would like to say in response to some of these things because, well, I mean, I've been the same log line for a while now. It's a big picture. And look, okay, so I come at everything from a Christian perspective, right? When you read Genesis 1 and you see, okay, God created man in his image. Like, I think that made the cosmic community jealous.
Like the neighbors.
Yeah.
You mean like people up there?
And because
Yeah.
I have my cosmology includes what I would call pre-adamic activity. And so I think that there's a lot. And that's because I've been working with people that have been defecting from the Illuminati and certain bloodlines for a long time. And all of these bloodlines seem to, I'm actually going to tell you the story, and for my listening audience, I mean, half of them were there for this, right? So we did we call it the Bride Tribe Advance, but we did this meeting, and so we're preaching Jesus and all this stuff and worshiping and waving our flags and stuff, having a good time, and it's a big party, but there was a build up, and at the closing session of that conference, I did a massive prayer of deliverance, and the target was what I call root races of the Illuminati, because I had begun to map with all of the clients that I work with different groups that all pre-exist Adam and who were all in this conspiracy against who I believe God is, Jesus, and using the human vessel as their tool of attack. So we're going to invade the genetics with ours, pirate the dominion and harvest from the image and use that. And because we have the goods, I mean, the trades are like endless. And so we did, and I will tell you, the results were off the charts, and the testimonies were quite extraordinary. And I mapped 13 races plus those in league with them. It's an interesting list, and I'll give you some of the names because that you might ping from some of the other stories you've heard. Because one of the groups happened to be the Pleiadians, and another group happened to be the Azarites. And 11 more. So, I see you making a face right now.
No, I'm like, wow, that sounds familiar, but I'm trying to think of where from. I have a hard time with names, but go on, keep going, please.
No, this is because I was supposed to be interviewing you. So now I'm going to flip the tables. But but you're saying stuff, and we'll just have to look forward to the book. I'm not sure if there's anything else you want to reveal about that section of your story today, because we could park it and wait.
Yeah, you've got the most out of me on that subject than anybody ever has. This is the most I've talked about the second book publicly in any public forum. And so you got a lot out of it. So that's great. A lot of the things I'm talking about haven't been written yet. Wow. So I'm in the process of it. And
well, folks,
I will keep you posted for sure.
We are blessed. So we get back to Ceres Colony. All right. And it is over. Now, you unfortunately were at the front of the line, apparently, because there were people behind you that didn't even have to do this.
Yeah.
That's messed up.
Right. So exactly. So I was in the beginning of the project. So um, when I got back, a few hours had passed, 45 minutes maybe. So now I'm trying to, um, but I came back off the table and they asked, and I was very disoriented. I was sick to my stomach. I was had a hard time talking. Like I was totally disoriented, like as if I had came out of, I was in a bad way. And they walked me to a, they took me out of that room and they walked me to another place, like down the hall to another room, and I got a quick medical checkup from humans. So in that room were these beings and humans, and that they were putting us through the process. They had their equipment set up, and then they walked us to another room down. And I got a quick medical checkup, and then I was just taken back to my bed and went to sleep. And I woke up and had to go to work the next day. I had to get up and go right back to my job that I hated the next day. And it was very disorienting still. So I had no really memory of what was going on. But in a short time, and perhaps a month or so after this, and I did not say this in the book, and I'm kind of just now realizing it as we talk about it, because that's how memory works, is I started having very profound dreams of being visited by a being. So I was being like, as I slept, I always had the same reoccurring dream on Series Colony. Like when you're not on Earth, it turns out that all the people in the colonies are aware of this. But when you're on Mars or another planet and you're sleeping, your dreams are different. The experience of dreaming is different.
Wow.
And the reoccurring dream that I always had, I think we talked about this before too, was that I would always go to sleep in my bed. I had like a small room that I was in, like it looked like a prison, no bars, but it was like what do you call it? Cinder block walls. It was not fancy. It was not shiny. It was concrete, and but I would go to sleep and I had the sensation of the floor falling away, disappearing, and me falling out into space and actually out like sleeping and astrally floating in space and seeing either sometimes I would see series or sometimes I would just be out and see nothing. And then whatever abstract dream that I was going to have would begin. So the dreams began that way where I would go out into space. And so there were times when after this instance where I would dream and I'd go out into space and there would be contact. There would be a friend there saying, and then it's just like dreams, how dreams, like you have this great time and this conversation, when you wake up you forget what you said. I knew I was there, what happened, what was I just saying? And it goes away, it's on purpose. And so that was the experience, and that began to happen after I don't want to say on a regular basis, but on a pretty regular basis, that for a short time that began to happen after this incident on series, and then it went into the rest of the book. So that was that. And then there's one scene from the beginning of the book that will tie in at the very end of the last book. So ultimately, the first two or three chapters, there's a scene in there that will come out of it'll be rewritten at the end of this next book. Hope it makes sense. I hope I'm not talking too cryptically here, but
There's a little bit, a little bit, a little bit. But I mean, we'll work it out. We'll work it out because I mean, April isn't but that far away.
That's right. It's not going to be long, and the editing process. The other thing is on this book, I've had a lot of people step up and volunteer to help. Like with editing, there's a lot of people that are behind me. Whereas the first book was like, I had all the support I needed. I was absolutely blessed. The people got a hold of me and said, Tony, do you need help? And I was like, actually, yes, I do. And I had all the support I needed. And Jackie Kenner and Andelara, who's an amazing person, very gifted, very, very righteous soul. And then Jackie Kenner, who is a very gifted person, editor, very amazing woman, um, really, really carried it. They did a lot of work on that book. This book, yeah, I've got a whole nother cast of people that are willing to help out, and like I'm getting like artists that are helping. So it's almost like a better, bigger crew of people that are helping with the editing. And so I expect it to go much quicker once we get the original transcript done. So it's going to happen easier. That's what I'm saying.
Wow. Well, Tony, this has really been good. I appreciate you going where you have not gone before and going there with us today.
Easy with you, my brother, man. It's some people you meet in life, and like I like everybody. Really, I'm a people person. I think people are my last hope, right? So I like everybody. But some people you just meet and you instantly have a connection, like your family or your friend. You're gonna be friends with them, and that's how I feel with you, Dan. I feel like, you know what I'm saying? Like if me and you lived in the same street, we would always be over hanging out with each other
We'd hang
constantly.
out.
And right. So I'd
Yes.
wave at the neighbor. I'd be happy with Miss Smith across the street. But me, I'd go over and knock on your door. What are you doing, man? Like I know that that's how we would be. I really have that feeling. I really do. So I'm more than happy to come on your show and give the dish as much as I can.
All right. Well, we'll park the conversation here. I mean, because there is a lot more we could talk about.
Yes.
But friends, not today. I'm gonna let Tony get some sleep, and because we are recording late, and so you can get his book anytime. Series Colony Cavalier. I read this book, friends, and I said, I think the information is so accurate. I made all my students in the DID Coach Mentorship Training Program read it because Tony is not lying about the things he's seen and experienced. And so I appreciate you writing that book, and I appreciate you as a guest and for your boldness to talk about this stuff that really will malign anyone. And you're doing it because you want people to know. And I appreciate that. So friends, until next time, God bless and Godspeed. It's time for the announcements. Hey friends, Dan Duval here to remind you that the home of Discovering Truth with Dan Duval is on danduval.com. This is where you can come to find all of our past podcasts and descriptions, as well as the opportunity to become a podcast patron, where you'll be able to join our online community, access to podcasts early, get exclusive discounts on merchandise, which can be found on our merchandise store at danduval.com. And we have all kinds of cool stuff, robes, flip-flops, shirts. Thank you for supporting us. And by the way, there's some great stuff, and you'll even see me at times wearing it on this very podcast. We also have another offering. It's called Overcomer Accelerated. At this opportunity, you'll be able to get coaching, live ministry demonstration as part of group coaching with me personally, a book study, and the entire institute that you can also find at bridemovement.com, but you get access to the whole thing on this platform for one monthly fee, as long as you're part of this program. And it's a lot of, over 100 hours of teaching at your fingertips. You can start quarterly. Every year now. We started with our pilot this past fall, and starting in January, we'll start the next quarter. You can enroll at the beginning of a quarter, and you can stop anytime. And we made this for survivors of brokenness and trauma backgrounds that wanted to have a learning experience centered around their healing journey. So check it out at overcomeraccelerated.com. Super cool program. And there are different price points which you can come in on. And you can also check us out at manifest.space, which is our private social network. We love putting people in community. You'll find some exclusive classes here and a lot of people that you can connect with. We'll see you on the other side. You're listening to Discovering Truth with Dan Duval. Those were your announcements. You've been listening to Discovering Truth with Dan Duval. Visit me at danduval.com, where you will discover merch, books, and the opportunity to engage in our private social network. Join the tribe by subscribing to our email list and supporting this podcast.